Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and to be able to join you in this discussion, we're going to call it, okay? Now, I want to first of all say that my approach and style in teaching methods, that sort of thing, includes the concept of creating a learning environment. So I want you to know, okay, that you can ask any questions. No question is dumb. The only dumb question is the one you don't ask, because we may not have this opportunity again. I'm pleased to be here, not just in this place, but to be here in this time, okay? Period. Because I could have been born at an earlier period in history where we wouldn't have this kind of diversity in a classroom. In fact, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, where everything was segregated. Yes. In my neighborhood, Ybor City, that was the sort of cigar capital. So I don't think we have any underage people here. I started smoking cigars at 5 years old. Yeah, because I live right next door to the cigar company, and across the street was a cigar company. So on two sides of my house, there were these huge cigar companies, okay? One was called Have Tampa cigar, okay? That was the largest one. It took up a whole block, whole city block, okay? And Garcia Vega was the other one. That was the one right next door. So we used to pole vault across the barbed wire fence so we could get over that fence, and then we could get the cigars that were rejects. They would put them in a huge wooden box outside because they had hot spots in them or something like that, so they weren't good to sell. You know about cigars, right? Yeah, okay. So the problem is the first time we were little boys and we got to figure out how to get across the fence. Because you can't climb the barbed wires to get you, you know. But you know what happened? We forgot, and we left the poles on the other side. So we were stuck. So what we did is that we observed that the dog had dug a hole under the fence, the bottom, and was able to get there. And so the only thing we did was expand that hole so that we little boys could crawl under there. So rather than pole vault every time, we just followed the dog, okay? Yeah, so we learned how to do that. And fortunately, we never got caught smoking the cigars because we would go under the house, you know? House was set up like that, okay. So that's a little bit about my background, all right? But I used to be Mr. Coffee, because at the age of 7, I used to get up in the morning around 5 o'clock, and I would pole vault out of, not pole vault, I just jump out my window. Because in Tampa, you know, we didn't have screens then. So we just opened up the window and jump straight out, and I would go and get orders for coffee, Cuban coffee, you know, for the merchants. And then I would go to Las Novedades, the Cuban restaurant, and I would get the orders for the coffee, and then I would go back. So it was pretty lucrative business in that day. 10 cents for the coffee, and then 10 cents for the delivery. Yeah, imagine that, okay? I'm talking about back in the 40s now. So I always had a pocket full of, you know, dimes, you know, when I went to school in the morning. In fact, I used to take care of lunch for 3 of the kids who didn't have lunch money. I was their financier. So I was a businessman at an early age, you know, so I got that. So I was sitting there on the, waiting, and I used to have to stand up and wait for the coffee to be prepared. So I used to lean against the stool there, you know, at the counter, waiting for the coffee. So gradually I became very affectionate towards the stool, and then I began to rub against it, and then eventually I wiggled my way up, and I was sitting on the stool. I remember that day and moment because that was a defining moment for me, age 7. I looked in the mirror, and the guy who was fixing the coffee looked at me. And I didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. He quickly looked outdoors to make sure nobody was watching me sit on those stools, because it was forbidden for blacks to sit on the stools. So, from that day on, I sat on the stools. I got served the coffee, but not for me. I couldn't drink the coffee. I could buy the coffee, okay, but I could not sit on the stool and drink the coffee, okay? So sit-in started when I was in college in 1960, all right? So they said, let's go sit in. It was nothing new to me. I've been sitting in all the time. You know, it came easy. Sitting on the stools, and the other easy part, not getting served. So that was not anything that was strange for me at all. Well, so forth and so on. The quick line of it, you can read that in books and stuff. I got involved in the sit-in movement and the freedom riots. Congressman John Lewis, you know, and I were in school together, and James Bevel and Diane Nash, okay? When the freedom riots stopped in 1961 because of the violence that took place when the bus was burned in Anniston, Alabama, when that happened, the freedom riots came to a temporary halt. We learned that nonviolence must be persistent. It's the difference between having a protest demonstration and having a movement. So what Martin Luther King was about was movement. And that is, you continue to have a total strategy which includes direct action, demonstrations, mobilizing, educating people to sustain a movement until the goal was reached. So this is one of the things we teach in our training. And before I go any further, I want to introduce Jonathan, we call him Globe, Jonathan Lewis, and Kaze, okay? And they are some of my expert trainers in the California area. They've trained in prison, they've trained in school, colleges, you know, corporate people, you know, foundation people, the whole bit. Okay, full range, all right? And that's one of the reasons I'm here, is because we're looking for people who are interested in carrying forth Martin Luther King's idea of nonviolence and be able to install that into institutions and also globally around the world. So far now, we have over 36 centers, that are operative around the world in different countries where we teach this. And there are a lot of different examples we can give you of how this can affect change and transform communities. And I just give you one example in, where was it? In Colombia, Latin America. Anybody here from Colombia? Have you ever been to Colombia? No? Well, you must go. That's the next stop you should make, okay? Colombia is further down the way there, you know? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, they have the FARC there, the FARC, okay? And they're the ones who, you know, kidnap people and kill people and that sort of thing, et cetera. So I'll tell you the story later, but they did kidnap me, okay? And so I need to give you some information in case if you ever get kidnapped, what you should do, okay? All right, so be sure to ask me about that. All right, so in Colombia, there's a prison called Bella Vista. In Bella Vista, they used to kill 6 people a day. And when we started nonviolence training there in Colombia, the inmates, they called us in because they wanted to get this nonviolence because they were losing their friends. Every day you wake up, you don't know who you're not going to see anymore. And it could be yourself, okay? That goes because they didn't have a list of people that they were going to kill. It was just you're chosen at random, okay? These different groups were fighting each other in jail. And they had all kind of weapons, even hand grenades and stuff like that. So that prison is a little different from, you know, the other prisons, you know? Yeah. So when we got there, we started working with them, and we got them to agree that there would be no more killings So we train the leadership. That's the key to it, leadership. All right, because you can't train everybody. So what you do is get the leadership, and then so goes the leader, so goes those who follow. So it's easier to train gangs because all you do is train the leaders, because the rest of them, they follow you. So we went to the prison and we identified the leaders, and they agreed that they will be trained, and we transformed that situation. Now that prison rather, it's the largest prison there in Colombia. It now is a nonviolent center where they bring the children from the schools to the prison so the inmates can train them. As I get older, I have to find ways to sustain this thing. So I wanted to find a faculty that I could have, a tenured faculty that I didn't have to pay. So most of them's got 3 20-year sentences, so I didn't have to worry about them transferring, or leaving. My only concern was keeping them alive. So the whole program was about stopping the killing. Okay? So that was self-fulfilling prophecy, you say. If you want to keep your faculty alive, you make sure that you have nonviolence training. Okay? Yeah, right. Well, I say that jokingly, but then you think about Connecticut, that's comes real. So that's what we're talking about. So what we're going to focus mainly on now is the whole concept of nonviolence mediation, arbitration, okay, and conflict reconciliation. And so that's the topic that you're interested in, and that's the topic we will focus on. But you can ask questions about any aspect of the movement. I'll be happy to respond to it. I can't give you answers. I only give you a response. Okay? All right. Because that's the best way to do that, my response. A bit more about my background. Education-wise, went to Milton High School, where I was the editor-in-chief of the newspaper. And the newspaper, these were all black newspapers now, the high schools all over Florida. And the one that got the first place, the newspaper, school newspaper got the first place, the editor got a 4-year scholarship at Florida A&M. Yeah. Yeah. So my paper was number 1, okay? And so what happened is that we got the first place, but I decided not to take the scholarship in journalism. I loved journalism, and I did a lot of work in journalism. I was the editor of the first yearbook in my college, okay, editor-in-chief. And then when I went to law school, I went to Boston University Law School for a year because I wanted to learn how to think like a lawyer. Didn't want to be a lawyer, but it's important to learn how to think like a lawyer. It's very important, okay? Both sides of the issue. You got to know one side as well as the other, okay? Very important. And I tell you more about that kind of way of thinking if you ask questions about it. The other is I was the editor-in-chief after my first semester. I was editor-in-chief of the Comment, which is the newspaper for the law school. So I was always into journalism, that's the important thing. And I did some articles and that sort of thing, and some books for children, that kind of thing, when I was a student at Harvard University. So I enjoy journalism, mainly the editing part. Somebody else write, I'll be glad to edit it for you. Okay, but I also write if necessary. In fact, I have a book that will be coming out later on this year in the fall, just on the Selma movement. So, freedom rides, sit-ins, Chicago, okay, all of those places I had opportunity, and with Martin Luther King and the Poor People's Campaign and that sort of thing, Memphis, Tennessee, all that. Now what I want to do is simply give you one example of mediation, and there are many other examples, but we want to start the discussion, okay? While I was at Harvard, I was in the library studying, and when I walked out in the hallway, there was a television program, news on, And it was about Wounded Knee. Have you heard of Wounded Knee? Some of you? Raise your hand. I can see now. Yeah, some of you know about Wounded Knee. It's in South Dakota, in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And it's a Native American reservation there, okay? And Russell Means, who passed just a few months ago, had an organization. He was Native American, and he called AIM, A-I-M, American Indian Movement. And he was very much concerned about issues related to Native Americans. And one of the issues in the whole area called Wounded Knee was the archaeologists were digging in the cemeteries, you know, of their ancestors, the Native American ancestors, getting relics and stuff like that. He was very disturbed because that was like disrespect for, you know, his ancestors, disturbing their spirits, you know. And then there were land issues where Native Americans couldn't sell their land or either lease their land to farmers for the same amount that the white people could lease their land to the same people. They got less money because they were Native Americans. And the Department of Interior was mainly responsible for that. Well, there were a lot of issues like that. So Russell Means went and he took over that reservation because he didn't like the way the chief was running things. And when they occupied that, the Department of Interior, our government, has a responsibility for giving security and protection to the reservations. That's part of the agreement, because these are separate nations within our boundaries of our country. We have about 52 nations in the U.S., Native Americans, okay? In fact, that's what Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, okay? That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get about 5 states in the Southwest, like New Mexico, okay, Arizona, and places like that. They said, let's give us these states over here, and, you know, black people could have their own nation, the Nation of Islam. Yeah. The Native Americans have theirs, okay? So that was their, you know, demand. Well, the Department of Interior became very upset with Russell Means, and Dennis Banks was his other partner there. And they went and they got the Army, and they set up tanks and everything, and they demanded that Russell Means and his people come out of that reservation. They refused. Russell Means was very, what they call militant. He said, I bury my heart in Wounded Knee. That's the title of a book. Okay, you might want to look that up, okay? So, I was in the hallway watching all of this on television, and I said, well, listen, I'm not going to sit here and see another cowboy Indian, okay, movie in real time. I'm going to do something. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to be there. So I went and got this credit card because they gave students credit cards. I never used mine, so this was the time to use it. I bought me a ticket. I called my buddy in Chicago. I said, meet me there. You know, you got some friends who are very close. You just tell them what you want them to do, and then you discuss it later. Okay, just meet me there. So he found a way to get a ticket, and we all met there. And then we went on into Wounded Knee. When we got there, okay, there were roadblocks. Our government had roadblocks leading into Wounded Knee. And then once you got to the reservation, there were roadblocks, the Native Americans. So we, fortunately, when we got there, our goal was to try to see if we round up some people and we're going to put a human chain between them. Well, that was a long way. We hadn't thought about that. We didn't think our way into acting. We act our way into thinking. In other words, you start taking action and then you think while you're acting. So that's the kind of, you might say, ethos that was operating there. So we said that, okay, they're not enough to make a chain. Fortunately, one of the people from the Justice Department, because there were different law enforcement agencies there. One was the Justice Department, one was the FBI, and the other was the Federal Marshals. By the time we arrived, one of the Federal Marshals had been shot in the back. So our government was very outraged, and they were very insistent that they come out of there. So what happened is that I met one of the Justice Department human relation people. He happened to have been there, and I met him in Washington, D.C. during the Poor People's Campaign, okay, because we had to negotiate a lot of stuff. I was a national coordinator for the Poor People's Campaign. So I had to negotiate with the different agencies in the federal government in order to, get permits and all that kind of stuff, et cetera, security, and that was my job, mainly in administration. We made Jesse Jackson the mayor of Resurrection City, okay, as we called it. And so that I knew him from Chicago, worked with him. If he tells you, that I trained him, it's true, okay? So he did very well there as mayor. But I met this this agent, and he knew that I was not going to carry weapons into Wounded Knee. So he gave me permission to go through that checkpoint. He said, now we can let you through this checkpoint, but it's up to them to let you in. Guess what? Russell Means, the one who was in charge, was also part of the Poor People's Campaign. There's several Native American groups. I remember some of the names, Mad Bear Anderson from upstate New York, and Rose Crowfly High from Seattle, Washington. Tilly Walker from, where was she from? North Dakota, yeah. The Mandan tribe. You know about the Mandan tribe? Well, you should see that. You should go. You go all over the world. Go to see the Mandan tribe. The babies have white hair. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the, characteristics of this tribe. And they don't have tents and stuff like that. Theirs are in the round, like that. Okay? Yeah. Like rather, real different from other places. I really want to go back there. That's why I'm thinking about it. I got caught for that moment. Yeah. But so Russell Means was there. And Russell Means, when he found out I was there, he said, oh, good. Because he knew I was part of the movement and that I could be of support to him, okay? Because they were very much alone and isolated, and a lot of the Native American tribes were desperately, outraged with him because he'd taken over this reservation. But he was actually trying to make a statement to the federal government. And this is where he decided to make his mark, okay? Well, the only way we can settle things is that you have to sit down and talk. Every war that's been settled because diplomats were able to sit down and talk. You got to talk. When you're silent and don't talk, it's paramount to violence. Okay? Violence is the language of the inarticulate. Those who don't talk. Psychologists say if you put two people in a room, one in one corner and one in the other, and they don't talk to each other, they would eventually attack. So, talking is important. Now, what happened is when I arrived in Wounded Knee, they had already agreed with the federal government that they were not going to talk. No talk policy. Some countries have that, no talk policy. Yeah. That means you don't want to sell the problem if you don't want to talk. They've given up. So, what do? I'm trying to get them to talk so we can settle this problem. So nonviolence negotiation is a very important part of the whole process. That's one of the 6 steps, negotiation. So I said, okay, I understand you're not going to talk. Okay. And I'm not trying to get you to talk. Now, how in the world are you going to mediate and you're not going to get people, and people won't talk? Well, there's a way to do it. That's what I mean by acting your way into thinking. So you know what we did? I got some paper, and I said, no, I'm not asking you to negotiate. I understand you've agreed on both sides you're not going to talk. But if you were going to talk, what are the issues? Not that you're going to talk, but I mean, if you were, you know what I mean? I'm not suggesting that you talk at all, but if you were, you know, hypothetically, what would be the issues? Well, you know, they're taking the artifacts out of the graves of our ancestors, this, that, and the other, et cetera. They so-called archaeologists, you know, yeah, we know what kind of gist they are. Okay, yeah, They have no respect for us. They wouldn't go and do their graveyards like that. They come over here, you know, and, okay, all right, thank you very much. What other issue? Well, this, that, and the other, okay. Oh, thank you very much. Don't get all of them at one time. In negotiations, don't try to get all the issues at one time. If you can get one, that's a start, okay? So I go back to our federal government, and, well, I stayed up all night long. I didn't sleep. So I'm used to not sleeping at night. I know how to do that in the movement. Sometimes you don't sleep. There are more important things than sleep, okay? Like talking. And that's why some people don't sleep. They stay up talking half the night, okay? Yeah. So the federal government said, no, we're not talking with them. No, I'm not asking you to do that. But if you were going to talk, and by the way, you keep separate. They don't need to know that right away, okay? What the issues are. You get their issues because they're the most important people now. So they're not responding to what somebody else thinks is the most important issues. You want their, okay, issue, and you want them to be the important one, not what they said. Okay, thank you very much. This issue, that's what you say. You want them to come out. They've overtaken the reservation, and they have disrespected, they have violated federal law, okay? Because our government is responsible for giving protection and security to the tribe. And here they have put us in a place where, okay, no, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got you down. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, how do you respond to this? They say that this is what they're concerned about. Well, if they say they're concerned about that, then there's a way and a process they can do. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, go back through the checkpoint. This is what they said about what you know, don't mention the word negotiations or mediation. Okay? Just say it. This is what they said. How do you respond? Thank you very much. One at a time. Don't get a whole list. No. Just one at a time so you can stay focused. In our movement, there was a problem with voter registration all over the South, Texas, and even some places in the North. All right, like Chicago, you don't know that, but if you had a third party that was running in an election in Chicago, you had to get twice as many signatures to get on the ballot. It's Chicago, third party. So it was discrimination against any other party. You get my point? Yeah, and that was in '65, okay? Chicago. So all of the problems with voter registration, okay, was not just in the South. Yeah, the Puerto Ricans in New York, they had to pass a literacy test. You could get a license driving the cab, but you couldn't vote. So that's another myth that you need to get clear. A lot of the problem with voter Texas, they had a poll tax in Texas. You had to pay to vote. Yeah, you know that lady with the liberty stuff and all that, you know, the scale? Oh, no, not in Texas. No. They said, this here Texas here. Yeah, you know, Texas called himself a sovereign state of Texas. You know what sovereign means, don't you? Okay, that means we make all decisions right here. Well, okay, so here we go, back and forth. Now, what was interesting is that when you went in and out of the checkpoint at night, they give you a signal to get back through. So you had to flash your lights a certain number of times. Then you turn your lights out and you drive in the pitch dark. Then all of a sudden, floodlights come on you and everything else. You know what else came on you? Those rifles trained right at your head. Because they didn't know whether the Native Americans, were going to sneak in a car and had the driver, drive up there, and they get up there and they kill somebody, you know what I mean? Guerrilla warfare, all right? So and these Native Americans, they didn't have bow and arrows and spears and stuff, they'd gone to Vietnam. They had dug foxholes there, and stuff like that. They were ready. Now, they couldn't handle tanks and stuff, when coming in there. But hey, they were experts in guerrilla warfare. So you had to flash the light 3 times, 4 times, 1 long, 1 short. They give you different signals that you had to use. So every time I got there, I had to use a signal, and they would train those rifles right at my head. I got upset about that. I said, golly, because that gun could go off. Somebody, nervous or something like that. You know what I mean? You got your finger on the trigger, you can't tell what's going to happen next. And then they would have a court hearing, but you'll be dead. You know what I'm saying? Court hearing, but you won't be hearing anything. Yeah, so, you have to be practical about these things, So I went over nonviolently and talked to the person in charge. You know who was in charge? FBI. Right. In fact, the code name was South Wind. That was a code name for the whole operation, South Wind. So you have to do a lot of research as you go along. Ask a bunch of questions. That's what you got to do. The quality of your questions is the process for change. The quality of your questions. You can stop a conflict by just asking questions. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe we'll talk about that a little later. Finish the story. So, when I went over to talk to the person in charge, this FBI agent, smoking a cigar. Yeah. The FBI agent was smoking a cigar. And then the FBI agent took the cap off because they, wasn't quite sure who I was and what I was doing, but apparently I got the okay from that Justice Department guy, so they kind of accepted me. And all this blonde hair dropped down on her shoulders. It was a woman who was in charge of the government operations, FBI agent in Wounded Knee. Okay? And her name was Susan. I got to find out and research what her last name was. You know what she said to me? Where were you when you got the call? She thought I was one of them. It's okay. I didn't tell her that. I said, oh, I was in the library, She said, well, I was on the beach when I got the call. She was in California. She was on the beach. She got the call. Okay? So we got to talking, being friendly. I didn't tell her what the issue was yet. You establish a relationship and you establish some rapport. It's very important. Before you start getting into solid issues, you have to establish rapport. There's some folks, business people, they say, I only do business with friends. You have to be friends first before we do business. Yeah, we know. Okay, I know too. Yeah. So, you have to start establishing a relationship. And I say, this thing really bothers me about the lights flashing like that on my car, but that's not a problem. It's the rifles that are trained on me. And maybe we can work out something where they wouldn't aim those guns directly at my head. Besides, I got this old car, it was not a modern car, and sometimes cars backfire. Suppose I got up there and put on brakes and the doggone car backfired. Hey, the car might backfire, but they will front fire. It'd be over for me. Well, long story short, she got them to not train their guns directly on me, but, on the side, so it could easily, if there was a problem. But they established rapport, so they felt that I was okay, all right? Well, our government the day before, that's the day I arrived, had already announced to the Native Americans they need to come out right now. They're going to come in and rout them out. They already had the army and the tanks and everybody else ready, okay? They said about 6 o'clock tomorrow. They gave them to 6 o'clock. Well, this was about maybe 10 o'clock the next morning when we got all of these issues lined up and we got responses. So it's called a paper negotiation, right? They didn't talk to each other. They talked to the paper. So the paper was the mediator. I just wrote down what the paper said, and I told them what the paper said. And so the paper, okay, was the tool and the mechanism for the negotiation. So they brought in another person from the media, their media representative, and they announced, okay, that they would not go in at 6 o'clock. This was about 12 o'clock that day, all right, that they were not going to go in and that they were reaching a settlement. So we finished the negotiations, and by this time we brought them together, Native Americans and the U.S. government agencies. We got them to come to Wounded Knee. That was a dangerous situation, by the way. I should tell you that, all right, out there. I was standing next to a doggone gas tank, gasoline tank, and some bullets came and ripped right in front of me like that. I'd have been gone if they'd hit that tank. And then what happened is a church caught on fire. Okay, Episcopal Church, I believe it was, in the tower. That's where the fire was, up there, in the tower. And one of the Native Americans told me, said, look at that, they're burning up the church. They're throwing those flares, because that's what they were doing. The U.S. government was throwing flares so they could make sure they weren't sneaking up on them, because they already lost one of the marshals who got shot in the back. And so they kept the sky lit up so they could see. Those flares didn't catch that church afire. I was there that night. 100 Native Americans, single file, walked over the hill because they had all the roads blocked, okay? But see, the Native Americans walked straight through the woods on top of the mountains, single file. They didn't go by the road, okay? They walked. The church was on fire, so they would know where to go. Yeah, because it's dark and you don't, so you could, that was the, okay, signal light. So a lot of interesting things happened. Now they caught me because I was bringing food in for the children. Because, the woman told me, said, I don't have food for my children. I can't feed them. Because they had this roadblock around, and nobody could come in and out. So what I did was got some food, put in the trunk of the car, okay, and went on in. But they were spying on me. They saw me, the government. And they say, you know you're not supposed to take anything in there because it's a roadblock. I said, but these children didn't have food. They said, that's not the point. Okay? So I apologized profusely. Okay? I said I wasn't going to do it again until next time. Some things are principle. I would take the consequences, okay, if they catch me carrying food to children. Some things that are more important than others. Some things are important and others are urgent. Food is urgent. Negotiations, important. You gotta know the difference. And the movement, that's one of the differences we make. Okay, I'll stop at this point. Let's talk. Any questions about anything in the movement or about the negotiations? But I just want to make one point about negotiations, and I did that. Yes, someone here, and you're next. Yes.
At the beginning of the class, you were talking about how it's really easy to reform gangs and prisons because you just train the leaders. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you encourage them that that's actually a good thing for them to do, Because my guess is they probably won't very quickly warm to the idea of, hey, we're just going to teach you how to be more peaceful.
Yes.
So,
That's a 15-day course that we teach. Okay? So I can't give you an answer, but I give you a response. And the response is you have to know which questions to ask them. Like an example, what are your goals in life? That's what we asked the Nigerian fighters in the Niger Delta area where they used to kidnap people and blow up pipes and all that kind of stuff. If you've been reading the newspaper, okay, like one time they kidnapped about 25 Filipinos, okay? It was on CNN about 3 years ago, all right? One had a mask over his face and had a gun in the air. That same one is a nonviolent trainer now, level 2 trainer. What we do is ask questions. Well, how long have you been fighting? Oh, about 20-some years. What do you say your goal was? Have you achieved your goal yet? How far are you from achieving your goal? Do you think that you, have made any progress so far? The goal was to get the government and Shell Oil to clean up the oil spills, okay, in their area. So they had legitimate issues. They weren't just being, militant, being bad and angry with the government. They had due cause. So they had killed Shell workers. They had killed government troops. And they were in the Niger Delta River area, which is swamp. And whenever they went in there, they got wiped out, the troops. One guy we trained and certified, when he testified after the training, he testified that he'd killed 170 people. That's that's not how many he shot and died later. Okay, he shot more than that and they died, so he doesn't really have an accurate count. Okay, some died later. So the point is, you ask questions and get them to think about their goals, their methodology, and what they're trying to accomplish. Okay? What if, like for example, you as a militant, and you've been fighting the government these years, what if you had the training where you could do the cleanup, environmental, corrections and stuff like that, etc.? Would you do that? Well, yes, that's interesting. Because you know what Shell Oil said to us? If you take the nonviolence training first, because they got to be sure that you're not going to turn on them, right, and go the wrong way. Because they had situations where government had programs and the militants got angry and burned the place down. So if you take the nonviolence training and then they give you skills, is that something you'd be interested in? Well, yeah. Questions. That's the point. Sharpen your questions so you can always be able to lead people to a new way of thinking. My friend Bevel, we went to school together, and John Lewis's book, Walking with the Wind, I'm the Bernard LaFayette he was talking about. He said I was the only one that can debate with Bevel, my buddy. You know how I debated with him? Well, this guy was really, Martin Luther King said he was a genius. He was on SCLC staff. He was in Chicago one time, talking to himself on the street, loud. And people, even in Chicago, got nervous. They called the police, had him arrested. Okay, and they got to the trial on Monday morning. He got arrested on Saturday, stayed in jail. The policeman who arrested him had to come and testify, right? Say, well, what was he doing? He said he was talking loud and, we thought he was delirious and he was arguing back and forth. So the judge said, is it true that you were talking loud and arguing out there on the streets in Chicago? He said, well, yes, it's true. Socrates and Plato are both dead. Who else am I going to argue with? Judge say, case dismissed. Judge didn't want to get into that. But that's the kind of person he was, very argumentative. So my approach to dealing with him, which they say I debated with him, wasn't any debate. I would listen to what he had to say. And then I would ask him questions about what he said, and he would argue, you see my point? The other side. Because he just loved to argue. So I got him to debate with himself. I didn't debate with him, okay? Now, he was good now, because one time we got arrested in Jackson, Mississippi, and they had both of us in jail. You know, it's a lot of details there, but I just go to the courtroom. And the judge was about to sentence us, almost, okay? We dismissed the lawyer, because the lawyer was arguing as if it was a criminal case rather than civil rights. And we used the lawyer as a consultant for the court, you know, for the clients. And we argued our own case. Bevel argued, and when he finished arguing with that Mississippi judge, it was almost like fire leaping behind him. He got choked, he was chewing tobacco and started coughing. We got concerned about him, you know, that kind of thing. And so Bevel had actually, he was a preacher, you know, he preached that judge into hell. Everybody got scared. He finished, you know, including the judge, you know what I mean? And if you represent yourself, the judge has to, you know, respect you, you know what I mean? So I had to come back, and I told the judge about purgatory. I didn't know anything about purgatory. I'm a Baptist, you know, but I heard about it, you know what I mean? So I started telling him there was a way out, that he didn't have to go to hell, all right? There was a way out for all of those who practice oppression and discrimination against people and that kind of thing. There still is an opportunity to be redeemed. So I took the redemption route. So again, Bevel set it up, okay, and I was able to, well, we got a case dismissed. They charged us $2,000 and 2 years in jail, but then they suspended the sentence, okay? And it was appealed and we won. But my point is, questions. I keep emphasizing, the quality of your questions will make all the difference in the success of your getting people to think differently. Isn't it true that when people ask you a question, even though you don't answer it, it circulates in your mind, as opposed to somebody making a statement? I just did it. You get my point? Okay, next question.
Oh, you mentioned acting before thinking or acting as you think. Is there ever a circumstance that you found that thinking way before was more efficient?
Yes, acting your way into thinking has to do with time and urgency. I would prefer thinking ahead and planning alternatives, plan B, plan C, you know, that kind of thing, so that you could at least be able to see the alternatives. Sometimes things are urgent, and if you spend your time trying to analyze and think it through and that kind of thing before you take action, it's too late. It's called the paralysis of analysis. So that all has to do with timing. Yes?
I was just wondering, Paul mentioned that you prefer the term conflict reconciliation rather than conflict resolution. I was just wondering if you could talk about it.
Yes. Conflict resolution means that you resolve the situation. Like if you're a teacher in the classroom and you're trying to get the lesson done, and these two boys, either that boy is bothering that girl, pulling her hair and stuff like that, like I used to do, you tell them to sit over here, and you sit over there. Separate them, okay? Separate the conflict. DNZ, demilitarized zone, okay? All right? You stop the conflict. You separate the parties in conflict. That's temporary. That's resolved, but it does not solve. Reconciliation means that you bring people together who are in the conflict and they understand a new relationship that they could have and work together. That's reconciliation. That's the simple definition, okay? All right? Yes. I'm so sorry, I didn't know who's next. You're next, yeah.
My favorite speech from Dr. King is Why I Opposed the War. And could you kind of explain how the transition from the movement to civil rights to that angle was difficult, the difficulties in it?
No, it's not difficult because they both dealt with violence. okay, and the civil rights movement, the oppressive condition and institution that was established actually represents violence, denies the person their human rights and their human dignity, okay, and presuppose that they are inferior, and that is the rationale for the oppression. The popular, well, it's not popular because you don't know about it, but the most pervasive term would be childism. That's what I call it, okay? You treat them like children, okay? Because of their color, their ethnicity, all right? Okay? And that's how you identify them. Women, they treat them like children. Childism. Elderly people, okay? Yeah, can't wait to get you in the nursing home and I'll sign your checks for you. There's nothing wrong with my hand, you know? Yeah, but your foot hurt, so, you know, you're elderly and I'll take over your operation for you, okay? Instead of holding the person's hands, even if they have a stroke, you can give them a pen and let them stroke their signature. Since they already know how to stroke. You get my point? Yeah. Don't take away their whole humanity, their dignity. Treat them like children. You're not going to give them no $20, $100 bill to no 4-year-old kid. What do you think you're supposed to do with it? Okay? That's like giving $100 to a woman who's going to go and buy some more shoes. You already got 37 pair of shoes they don't wear. But as a man, I can go and buy a new set of golf clubs because I want to. I don't have to get permission, you know? Yeah. Because I'm the one, okay, that's in charge. All right? Yeah. So, childism. Employers treat their children. I mean, treat their employees like children. Supposed to get off from work, you know, at 4:30. So 4 o'clock, they give you a 2-hour assignment. You have to get permission to get off from work. Employer, I won't be here on Monday. I'll be taking care of some business over at the golf course. 'Cause that's where they do business, you know, golf course. That's what it is. So, the point I'm making is that the oppressive situation that people have to experience is one of the things you have to take into account, and how people use their power and use their authority and looking at people who they feel that are lesser and have less power and that kind of thing. Okay? All right. What was the question? You forgot the question? Huh? It wasn't me. I didn't do it.
Was on reconciliation, conflict reconciliation.
Vietnam War, how the strategy shifted from segregation to...
Don't be bothering old people. Yeah. So both of them dealt with violence, and so one systematic oppressive violence there, but it also was the same in the war. Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, who was Martin Luther King's wife, had gone to Antioch College, Quaker school, and she was already involved in the peace movement. So she had the greatest influence on Martin Luther King to take that stand against the war in Vietnam. Martin Luther King knew it was unpopular. Even his board of directors for SCLC, the organization that I'm now chairman of, did not support Martin Luther King taking the stand against the war. Because, you know, the whole notion was support your country, right or wrong, in war. Okay? Many of them were veterans of World War II. Remember the period of time? Okay? Yeah. So they couldn't support taking that kind of stand, okay? But Martin Luther King did it on moral. And you know what he said? He said, I have fought against segregation too long, now to segregate my conscience. What's wrong in the U.S., okay, and what's wrong in Vietnam, okay, must be condemned. It's no different. So I'm not going to segregate my conscience. And what we're doing to the Vietnamese, you know, Vietnam was about the size of Texas, you know that? And we were bombing and killing folks and all that and talking about, you know, bombing Hanoi. So, yes, that was an easy transition on terms of the philosophical level. It was much more difficult on the practical structural level because Martin Luther King didn't have a lot of support in the beginning. So there was some conflict. There was some discussion among his peers. Yes.
I would like to, before we thank him, I'd like to say that I hope that you can bring this out in more detail tonight in your talk, because I think many other people will be interested in this as well. And so that is an invitation for you guys to consider hearing more. As you can tell, there's a lot of wealth here. And so tonight from 5 to 6:20, he will be making a public lecture in SPA 1100. And that can be an extra credit event for you, or it can be just a wonderful experience. What we can guarantee.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much.
Okay.